这个女人也在看报纸。
这个女人也在看报纸。这个女人。So I use a bunch of different apps for different purposes, some for vocabulary, some for grammar, and then I like to watch dramas or YouTube content for listening practice. I use all of it to study so that I'm prepared for lessons or free talks with my italki teachers. Today, we're looking at a few tests I took for Spanish, Korean, Chinese, Portuguese, and Japanese. I took these in early September, I believe, so I'll show you what the tests look like and what I thought about their differences and how they grade me as well. Let's get into it. So as far as this first Spanish test that I took, it was so long. This one was super thorough. It had listening practice, reading comprehension practice, all kinds of grammar and all kinds of other stuff too. And honestly, I got bored with it after probably the 10th question, and eventually I kind of did the same thing like I would in high school, where you start to kind of skim and just do like choose, okay, it must be this one or whatever. So I feel like eventually I couldn't get really an honest response of what I was looking to accomplish in this test. So then I did end up looking for another test because I was getting so bored. Oh, I felt like I was in IB Spanish all over again. And it was really slow. It was like 30 questions per section. So I had finished the like beginner's one test after like 30 or 35 minutes. And I was like, okay, I can't take any more of this test. So then I did switch over to a different exam that seemed like it was going to take a little bit less time. And that's just a personal thing. I'm sure the first test was great for assessing someone's level because it had so many questions. You're able to get a wider pool of content to test from. Whereas if there's just a 30 question test or however many questions it is, you don't really know how much vocabulary someone knows. But at the same time, you get a good idea, I think. It doesn't take that much. I'd say this one was pretty accurate because I do know a lot of Spanish vocabulary, but I don't speak very well. Secondly, with the Korean test, I just use Talk to Me in Korean. His YouTube channel is really helpful. His app is really helpful. I use it probably only like 2 times in the past. The last time I tested, I was level 2. So we're going through this test, and as you can see, it's a lot easier than the first Spanish test I was taking, which was like insane from the jump. And this one is a lot more simple. And we'll see how I do at the end of this. Just in comparison, I think Spanish in general is just, they test a little bit more strongly, I think. And that's always been the case. When I look at other tests, I'm like, this is not as difficult as the Spanish test that I've taken in like 5th grade, which had like 1,000 questions and stuff like that. But these are just kind of like pretty easy. And I was really impressed actually, because I didn't expect to know as much vocabulary, but we'll see what level I get to now at this point. This was in September, and I had tested level 2 in August, so it'll be really cool to see how much growth I've had or if there's been no growth at all. Okay, level 5 is pretty good. I've been studying Chinese since the end of July, and so I finally am taking this beginner's test. I just found one that was free and this one only had 30 questions, so we'll see. It's testing my knowledge of what I should know, I guess, as a beginner student. I don't really know in context of how long this beginner student has been studying or whatnot. At this time, August, September, I've been studying Chinese for about 2 months and probably 2 weeks when I took this test. From the jump with Chinese, I studied with a teacher. I think I had watched a couple YouTube videos before I contacted my italki teacher, maybe 2 weeks after that. So it was really interesting to see what of the vocabulary and of the symbols I understood. Because there's a lot of vocabulary that I know, like what it means in English, but I don't know how to pronounce it as far as characters. And then there's things that I know how to say, but I don't know what it looks like in the Hanzi. And Chinese has been the most exciting language to learn. I don't know what it is about it, but it's easy to retain vocabulary. I can visualize the pinyin in my head. And so there's me cheating. Because I was like, I just learned this word. So I knew it was in my notes somewhere. They say that I'm about a middle beginner, and that's great considering it's only been 2 months and 2 weeks. I'm happy. Portuguese is one of my favorite languages to hear. It just sounds so beautiful to me. But honestly, I don't have an interest in that many of the Brazilian and Portuguese dramas. not as high an interest in them as I do in like Korean dramas for sure, or in Chinese dramas. So I don't watch that much content. And so since I don't really have anyone that I'm going to speak to in Portuguese, it's also hasn't been a high priority um, for learning it, but I still want to. So I study it a lot less these days than I had in the past. So most of this is just passive memory, but I've started to actively study it again, kind of like within the last 2 weeks. I'm trying to get with my teacher a lot more often so I don't forget the vocabulary and the words I do know. And honestly, when I read Portuguese, I can understand the sentence, and that's why I feel like I'm not learning anything. So I need to find a new strategy for Portuguese altogether. This test was, I like this test. It was really interesting, and I was very curious to know that after having not studied actively for like 2 years, where I was at, so I know where I should begin next time. I do like listening to Brazilian music, so that's probably the most interaction I get with it. Yeah. And then, oh, I really like studying with this particular YouTuber, Easy. I think it's called Easy Brazilian Portuguese or Easy Portuguese. He like reads a story with you in Portuguese and shows you like kind of the places where the pronunciation differs from like what you would learn in the textbook or whatnot, or how something's actually spoken. And I really enjoy reading those with him. And I love my Portuguese teacher on italki so much. Every time I get a chance to speak with her, it's such an awesome experience. Since I have a lot of listening vocabulary, I can understand and have like a meaningful conversation with her versus when I'm having like a Korean free talk. I can't really say that much. I hate reading blurbs and then having to answer what like I just read. It is like the bane of my existence altogether. So those parts, I'm sure, I just kind of like blah blah blah, choose something because it's so exhausting. I don't know what it is, but if it's not a sentence, I'm like, okay, ABC, let's choose that. In the end, I was actually surprised to get the intermediate level for Portuguese because I was like, I have not actually been pursuing it in so long, and I was pretty sure that none of that would be still in my mind. So I'm thoroughly happy to have that experience. Japanese, my poor Japanese language baby. This was actually the very first language I started to try to learn after leaving college and finishing with Spanish. I was like, Japanese is something that has always been on my mind. When I was in like middle school, we were supposed to have this language class where we learned like 6 different languages and compare them. But the teacher got sick, so we never had the class. We had to substitute the rest of the year, like from September all the way to May. So Japanese has just always been on my mind, and I liked to be able to watch animes. I thought the language was so interesting because it has the same vowel sounds as Spanish. So I was like very curious about it because I really like Spanish too. And so to test here, there's a lot of hiragana that I understand. And so if it's like the kanji doesn't really deter that much from understanding the words that are in the paper. So reading it is fine, but being able to remember those words and recall them to speak them is what's extremely difficult for me. Beyond like introductions or drinks and food, I could not have a meaningful conversation at all with someone in Japanese. And really, most of my language learning is just so that I can watch and consume lots of content. So that works for me. As long as I can read it and listen to it, that's really my end goal with most language learning. So here I got 95 out of 100, so I'm very happy, very surprised. I'm sure it'd be much lower if I took an official test, but this was the journey.